Welcome to Inside Imaginary Realism, an art show about visionary art and beyond. I'm Bonny Hut and we bring you this new mini-series. Each week we will be asking new and different questions of our artists living in Australia. We will be introducing art genres occasionally overlooked by the mainstream art world, now regaining recognition.
What is art?
Art is a process of discovery that gives human beings an opportunity to dive deep into their imagination and come back with information, thoughts, ideas, energy that we can share with each other. And these can be depictions of our psyche, they can be pathways to our emotional body, or they can be windows into our psyche.
I think for me, art is it's a combination of life and creativity. It's giving birth to something. It's making something from nothing. It's having the ability to be able to look at everything and being able to form it into something from nothing. So that interpretation can come from a lot of different things. It could be that someone mows their yard in a very particular way. That's their art. Everybody has their own way of looking at life and their own way of interpreting that and making that from nothing into something. That to me is art.
In my opinion, I think art is an expression of every individual. For me, it's an expression. I can actually tell a story through visual, my visual works, and yeah.
The eternal question.
It's a pretty big, difficult question. I think art's life, and like life, it's multifaceted and can go in many different directions, and it's not always tangible. I prefer it that way.
Drawing things from the subconscious, from the imagination, and giving them physical form.
Yeah, I think it's an expression. It's an expression for yourself to express this beauty that you see in different sort of objects, people, emotions, and it can come in many different forms. And we tend to paint what our art is.
All that we can distill from the soul and bring out into form through a creational process.
Art to me is creation, I think, basically. I look at a lot of things that I paint and it's like I want to possess them.
But I would say it's an expression of each person's uniqueness. What makes them different, and what you like and what you don't like, as far as art, music, dance is concerned, says a lot about who you are and your own personal character.
Art is the manifestation of the human expansive experience into the physical.
It comes to us in many different forms, be it the dance of a dancer's dance, or on a potter's wheel, or through the photographic lens. It always creates itself anew, and similar to a snowflake, it never repeats itself.
What is the difference between visionary art, imaginary realism, and surrealism? Can you name other genres that you think are similar, and why?
Well, being an imaginative realist myself, I understand that mode of painting quite well. It's creating realistic images that are probably not in a common pose or format or composition. People in situations that they wouldn't normally be in. But if you wanted to pose the situation, you could. So it is actually realism with a twist. I think surrealism is more dreams and more distortion, and it becomes far more abstract in a sense that the distortions pull creatures apart. It's like your dreams. Things seem real in a dream, but they're not actually real in real life.
And there's crossovers between the genres, you know, the visionary, surreal and imaginative realism.
Yeah.
All have moments of crossover, you know, like I'll work in a surrealist fashion, working from that dreamlike fashion, but it will sometimes go into a subconscious state, which is more visionary.
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the visionary side, I think, is more where you don't know what you're going to paint, and it just actually happens out of your brush, and it starts to form on the background of the canvas.
It has more of a mystical, cosmic
cosmic
approach.
And I include that in a lot of my work. Like the background, I usually pick a subject. I know what I'm going to paint as the subject, but the background becomes just out of my thoughts at the time as it creates.
And putting objects in different contexts, like that becomes the surreal. Imaginative realism.
And I think New Age art is bordering along that area too, but it's been taken a bit further and almost branching into fantasy art. Yeah, so I don't really want to go towards fantasy art, but I love where I am at the moment. I think I'd like to show the world where I am at the moment.
I think the thing that makes visionary art different than most is that there's a touch of spirit in there. It's a touch of searching within their soul, like being able to communicate with something greater than themselves, beyond the physical plane. It's not necessarily so much a way of looking at and making a story. It's a way of being able to get in touch with themselves.
No. I just, maybe I'm lazy, but I just couldn't be stuffed trying to rationalise it, so I prefer not to. That sounds really negligent, but I just don't want to.
I think they all overlap in their own way. They all have their philosophies, and if you're a true follower of visionary, imaginary, or whatever other genre, then yes, they are different. But in my opinion, from what I've seen, I think they overlap.
This is a rather complex question. There is no defined answer to this, but from a simplistic point of view, I would say that imaginary realism is simply combining objects that wouldn't normally be together in quite an imaginative way. Surrealism is also combining those objects together, but possibly more bleed between the objects, more flow between the objects. And visionary art, again, there's many different definitions about what visionary art is, but I would say it's very similar to imaginary realism and of course surrealism. One of the main differences is it's got a slightly more spiritual or etheric edge.
What is happening with these art movements today? How does the world and the commercial art world view these art movements?
It seems to me that everything that's realism, well painted, crafted, people with skill, are being excluded from the major art scenes in the galleries, in the teaching places, institutions that have been for a while. Very much seem to me to be pushing us out of the picture. I often get the feeling that they're a bit afraid of us because we won't go away, and I think that reason is because all we want to do is paint. and we'll paint in solitude if that's what it has to take. But of course we like to show people our work, so we bring it out and show people our work.
Yeah, I feel that the concentration of cerebral art, the conceptual, has taken over the institutions, and our type of art gets considered, and I've heard it firsthand, as overly sentimental, passé, and it sort of takes away from the general population of viewers. They get bombarded with a bit of brainwashing and don't respond to art in what they see and appreciate for themselves.
And they actually criticise our work. They find names to criticise it that we might not know about, like scatological.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take us long to figure out what scat actually is.
Yeah.
And that's their little way of poking fun at us. I think they try to keep us out of the picture as much as possible.
But unknown to them, or maybe known to them, the whole world globally is coming up from underneath with the realism, surrealism, visionary, on a global scale. It's incredible.
The internet's helped us so much
absolutely.
in keeping us all in touch and informed with each other, and finding out there's quite a big movement out there of our type of work.
People that have skill, that have spent many years developing something, being the skill base and the creative process combined into an imaginative result. And the general population, when they get a chance to see it and hasn't been excluded from being shown, then they do respond positively.
Yeah, from the shows we've had, there's good response to it, and I think it's making insurgents back into mainstream as the general public tend to see more of it.
I think the world in general doesn't truly understand art movements or art in general. In terms of the commercial use of that, I think it's more to do with the way that they're trying to market to individual audiences, and because it's such a personal experience, I think what people relate to the most is that when they look at it, they look at the art, then they themselves go on their own personal journey, their own personal interpretation of that, and that's what they identify with, that feeling, and being able to look at themselves through the art and heal themselves and communicate with themselves and come to their own understanding. It's really hard to be able to market that, because if you're trying to market that to a large audience, then they're looking at a way of being able to commercialize it, and I just don't know how they could do that.
Would you say your own art fits into one of these movements? Or do you prefer not to label your art style?
I prefer not to label my artwork. My audience, and I've always agreed with them, have always said that my work exists outside of any spectrum of any organized catalog or labeling that exists so far. And if anything, I'd like to be bringing in new information and deal with new mysteries that sort of redefine our current idea of what is possible, as opposed to fitting into any sort of mold or movement that exists so far.
My art to me is very personal, and I've always looked at my art as a part of who I am. Like, when I make it, I invest my life into it, I invest my time into it, so it's just an extension of myself. It's a crystallization of who I am. And it's really hard for me to put that within any kind of descriptive genre. I find a lot that I see people that do something that I find really inspirational, and I want to be around those people, and I want to surround myself with those people. And visionary art at the moment gives me a really great opportunity to be able to communicate my story with other people that are trying to do a very similar thing. They're all trying to get in touch with themselves, and they're all trying to understand themselves, and they're trying to communicate with something greater than this physical plane. And I think that's what attracts me to the visionary art movement. I'm not sure if I'm a visionary artist, and I really don't mind if people don't classify me as that, but I do tend to relate to a lot of the people that are making art in that genre at the moment.
I would say that my art fits into the visionary art category.
I feel my work fits into the visionary art movement because it really does come from that sense of visualizing our future for humanity. So these visions arise through the soul, and I feel like that's in alignment with what I'm communicating.
I'm quite happy to label my work. I used to feel that I was a surrealist, but I knew I wasn't fully surrealism. I wasn't painting. The genre is so blurred now that there's too many different types of art to fit into the one, so we've made new names up. And imaginative realism suits me the best. I'm quite happy with that.
Yeah, I tend to go along the lines of surrealist, mainly because it just keeps steering in that direction. Imaginative realism. See, I practice with realist techniques, with life painting, and bring that into the imaginative world. Not by choice, it just happens. I have no power over that. So I would say labelling me as a surrealist or imaginative realist, but you've got to combine all of them together because you do cross over into many different areas.
I don't mind labelling my art style. I'm an imaginary realist, I think, because I imagine what I want to paint. But in the movements today, I think I would fit into the visionary, imaginary world in my art.
I think my own work probably does fit into some of these movements if people choose it to be. For myself, I'm not really concerned about that. That's not what I'm worried about. I'm more interested in evolving the next concept or the next idea or the next visual. And I'm not thinking about a movement, I'm thinking about what I'm wanting to manifest, even though I don't really want to know what that is, which sounds like a contradiction, but both things happen at the same time.
I prefer not to label my style because, as you can probably see, my style is rather varied.
I would say that my work is a bit of a mix. I don't specifically paint something or do an artwork to fit in a genre. I just simply do the work and then maybe it fits, maybe it doesn't. Yeah, and I think most artists don't like to be too confined to a label. But also it does help. It does help identify with other artists who paint similarly to your own work with regards to group exhibitions, group shows, group projects, and so forth.
Do you think there's such a thing as skill-based and non-skill-based art?
Yes, but I don't necessarily prize or value one higher than the other. I've seen people just pick up a brush and create the most amazing works of art without any skill at all.
Skill-based and non-skill-based art, really it depends on the individual and the art piece. I really don't believe that it matters. Skills can be cultivated in many different areas. Technical skills can be amazing in painting, but not necessarily portray the skills that the soul and the imagination can cultivate.
Most definitely, yes, that's a good question, I like that. My art is totally almost based on skill because I love skill. Learning how to use my hands and keep using my hands is so essential to me. If I'm not painting, I'm making models, I'm making aeroplanes, I'm digging my garden, all that sort of thing, yeah, skill-based. And you look at some of these other works, I think a classic example I saw in England was an exhibition and someone had put a plinth up and called it a mile-high column of air. There's a lot of skill for you, sorry.
Yeah, I consider that there is definitely skill base in, let's say, conceptual artists. They have intellectual skills, they have conceptual skills. We are using our hands and our mind and our hearts, and over many, many years developing a skill that was used from the old masters and constantly developing it till the day we die. So this skill builds, and yeah, there is a big difference when I've had an abstract artist who just slaps it on very quickly, attack my style of work, and it came down to the fact that they didn't know how to draw. So
Is there such a thing as a skilled or a non-skilled carpenter, mechanic, dressmaker? So why should art be any different?
I think if you're truly in touch with yourself and you love what you do, then the quality is going to come through no matter what. In terms of like technical precision or detail or any of those things that come with practice, is that craftsmanship. If you don't have the love for what you do, then it's not going to show through. And the difference between having skills and not skills really is just time. But if you feel passionate about it, it doesn't matter if you can draw or paint or have skills, it's going to communicate. You can see it. You can see that passion in the art, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Well, a lot of people who paint within the broad spectrum of imaginary realism and visionary arts are artists with quite a high level of skill, and to some degree skilled art is not that revered in the contemporary art world. I would say partly because it's not as commercially viable as a painting that took a fraction of the amount of time to produce.
Well, there's definitely a multitude of different art forms, and I think if anyone does art for a long period of time, it becomes skills-based. Even if it's so-called unskilled or skilled, if it's like, you know, ready-mades that they just pull out of a toilet or whatever, there's a skill that comes from that if you do it long enough, and you'd end up having to think about it more deeply. And so I think ultimately, if the more you do it, the more skilled it would be. So I can't see I just don't know if I like the terminology unskilled or skilled.
Yes, absolutely. I do believe that there's a big difference there. I mean, I could be drinking a glass of wine and eating a chocolate brownie, and I could wipe my mouth on a napkin, and it could look like an abstract Mona Lisa or the Last Supper. But it may look even a lot better than some of the art that exists out there in the art world. But I would be personally more inclined to give my respect and my intrigue and my appreciation towards pieces of artwork that have passion, have integrity, have pursuit of practice, and have these sorts of skilled-based practices in place.
We trust that you enjoyed this week's program. Inside Imaginary Realism was brought to you by Metro Television. Please see the Visionary Art Network Australia's website to see more art and artists. visionaryart.net.au. The Department of Communication intend to take community television off-air Australia-wide. Please go to Channel 31's website at c31.org.au and join the campaign to keep us on air.